So let's talk about health. We always think about diet and exercise, right? But what if I told you there's something way bigger at play? We're going to dive into this really powerful idea that the system you live in could have a massive say in how healthy you actually are. I mean, think about it. We're constantly told our well-being is totally up to us. You know the drill. Eat your veggies, sleep 8 hours, go to the gym, and poof, you're healthy. Sounds simple, right? Well, yeah, but it turns out the real story is a lot more complicated than that. So let's frame it this way. What if the rules of the world around you, what if those have an even bigger impact? Imagine life as a game, but what if the rule book is different depending on who you are? Or what if the game board itself is tilted, designed to give some players a huge leg up while others can barely even make a move? That's really the heart of what we're digging into here. So what we have is basically a tale of two systems. On one hand, you've got what we'll call a health-restricting system, one that puts up roadblocks and limits your chances to be well. And on the other hand, you've got a health-flourishing system, which is built from the ground up to support you. And these aren't just theoretical concepts. For a lot of people, this is their day-to-day reality. And here's the cool part. This isn't just something we're making up. This whole framework comes straight from academic work that breaks down how these social systems really impact our health. So let's get into it. Let's look at the rules that make these two worlds so incredibly different. All right, so first things first, let's talk about access. How do these systems even work? How do they decide who gets a shot at things? Well, it all boils down to how they're built, kind of like the architecture of opportunity itself. So in that health-restricting system, you run into these, let's call them boundary mechanisms. Think of them like invisible walls or a super confusing maze. They basically divide society up, creating different levels. And that makes it way harder to get to the good stuff. Good jobs, quality education, even just simple info about your health. But in the flourishing system, it's the total opposite. The paths are clear, the doors are open, everyone has access to the resources they need to be healthy. And that leads right into this idea of agency, which is just a fancy word for your power to actually do something, to influence your own life. In the restrictive system, your power to make things better is, well, pretty limited. Your influence is what you'd call suboptimal. But in the flourishing system, it's a whole different ballgame. Your agency is optimal. You actually have the power, the resources to make that system work for you. And of course, a huge piece of this puzzle is resources. The restrictive system creates what's called a concentration of disadvantage. A big part of that is having poor access to social capital. And social capital is basically, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? It's the power of your network. In the flourishing system, you get the exact opposite, a concentration of advantage, where people's connections and networks actually help lift everyone up. Okay, but here's the kicker. These systems, they don't just happen by chance. They're designed to keep themselves going. They create these really powerful feedback loops, vicious cycles or virtuous cycles that are just incredibly tough to break out of. So, how do they pull that off? Well, take a look at this quote. It's straight from the source material. It says that in a health-restricting system, the status quo, just the way things are, is designed to keep people at a disadvantage. It's a system built to feed itself, creating that vicious cycle we were just talking about. So how does that even work? Well, it's through something researchers call system attractors. You can think of these as the invisible forces, the gravity, that holds the whole system in place. They can be really deep-seated beliefs, or stories we tell ourselves, or just the way things are structured, but they all work to constantly pull everything back down toward disadvantage. Okay, now let's flip the coin. Because in a health-flourishing system, the status quo also reinforces itself, but, in a good way. It's built to create and maintain a lasting advantage for the people inside it. And you can see that virtuous cycle right here. It all starts with a system that's just built for success. That foundation lets people form really strong connections, building up that social capital we talked about. And what's the result? Well, you get better health, you get more resources, and all of that feeds right back into the system, making it even stronger. It's this powerful, self-sustaining upward spiral. So, okay, we've talked about the rules, the cycles, the feedback loops, but what does it all boil down to? What's the bottom line when it comes to a person's actual health? Let's check the final score. And honestly, it's pretty stark. When you're in that health-restricting system, poor health is just more likely. It's not a guarantee, of course, but the deck is absolutely stacked against you. And in the health-flourishing system, It's the complete reverse. Better health isn't just possible, it's the more probable outcome. The system is literally designed to make it happen. And this all leads to two totally different endgames. On one side, the restrictive system creates this circulation of disadvantage. It traps people. It makes it almost impossible to get the resources or connections you need to get ahead. Meanwhile, the flourishing system ends up with a hoarding of social resources, where all that advantage just gets more and more concentrated within that one group. Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question, right? Think about it for a second. Look at your own life, your own community, your access to things, your ability to change your circumstances. What system do you think you're in? Because at the end of the day, that's the big takeaway here. Our personal choices, they definitely matter, no doubt about it, but they are not the whole story, not even close. The systems we're a part of, the ones we're born into, live in, work in, they have this huge and often totally invisible impact on how well we live. And that really leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. You know, it's one thing to see these systems and point them out, but the real challenge, the hard part, is figuring out how we start breaking down the restrictive ones. How do we build more systems where everyone, no matter where they start, actually has a real shot at flourishing?